Hello friends. Today we're going to discuss about critical thinking, an essential life skill. I'm Dr. Suresh Badadmat, Professor of Psychiatry, working at NIMANS, Bangalore. Before I start my presentation, I would like to place this disclaimer. This presentation is for academic and training purpose only. For clinical opinion, please do contact a psychiatrist. Conflict of interest? None. In this video, I'm going to discuss about what is critical thinking, how to foster critical thinking in children and adolescents. This video is targeted to school and college administrators, teachers, policymakers, parents, children, NGO, corporate, and community at large. Critical thinking. The life skills which are very essential to be learned are 10, which are identified by World Health Organization. These 10 life skills have been divided into three important domains. One is cognitive domain, emotional domain, and social domain. In cognitive domain, creative thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, and decision making. In emotional domain, coping with emotions, empathy, coping with stress, self awareness. And in social domain, effective communication and interpersonal relationships. In this video, I'm going to discuss about critical thinking. Let's define critical thinking. Critical thinking means ability to examine information rationally and make a reasoned judgment based on objective analysis. This critical thinking is basically a method of logical inquiry and reasoning. Further, it is also defined as analyzing, conceptualizing, synthesizing, applying and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication. The critical thinking is very simply, it can be defined as logical inquiry and reasoning to solve the problem. Critical thinkers refuse to accept the subject matter at face value and are aware of their own cognitive biases, which allows them to approach objective conclusions. Basically, critical thinking means objective way of solving the problem. Even though they have biases, they are well aware and they have insight into their biases. They do not accept thinking on face value. How do critical thinkers evaluate an idea? It is an ability to think in a rational manner in order to understand the logical connection between ideas, detect inconsistencies and mistakes in reasoning, identify, construct, and evaluate an arguments, reflect on the justification of one's own belief and values, identify the relevance and importance of idea, and solve the problem. Here, critical thinkers go through various ways of analyzing a issue. It is connection between the two ideas, whether there are any reasoning, logical explanation, is there any errors in their logical understanding. Even they also think whether they have their own biases in approaching this problem, identifying, constructing, and evaluating the argument, and also solving the problem objectively means critical thinking. Why critical thinking is useful? In the era of information and technology, further, internet, social media, they spread rumors, they spread half truth. Unverified information is spreading very fast. Propaganda and also political issues, religious issues are spread very fast. In this scenario, each person who is using social media, IT, need to think critically whether the information spread or the information what they have got, is it worth pursuing, whether it is right or wrong, whether there is a logical understanding, whether it is a truth or false, is there any agenda behind this information need to be evaluated. Hence, children need to be taught to evaluate the information critically before they believe or behave or forward it to somebody else. That means critical thinking is very essential component, especially in the era of IT. As you know, the social media is playing a major role in our life. Without critical thinking, you start accepting whatever the message you get is true, imagine what will happen. There will be riots, there will be fights, there will be no belief on other system, another political system, another religion. That means diversity will create a problem here. That means diversity and unity. That's what is our thinking. But unfortunately, without critical thinking, evaluating, and also objectively observing will be lost. Hence, critical thinking is very, very essential. The greatest benefit of critical thinking is simply to help you to make informed decision making in your everyday life. What is informed decision making? Informed decision making is you have got an information. Now you need to evaluate this information in a 360-degree, assess the information from all possible perspective, think about whether you are thinking logically or illogically, whether there is own biases, is there any propaganda behind. So these kind of evaluation is very, very essential in this era. Now let's understand what are the steps in critical thinking. First and the foremost, pinpoint the problem or the information, collect the information which is not told or given to you, assess the information from all possible manner, examine and scrutinize the information, evaluate the information logically and objectively, draw the conclusion and test the conclusion. These are the very important steps which need to be taught in critical thinking. The best example of critical thinking I can give you is you have a problem in the hand. That problem need to be analyzed first. Analyze the problem by collecting information from all possible sources. Now once you got the information, analyze the data. And now once you analyze the data, now you need to take a decision which is evidence based, data based. In certain time you may not be able to reach the complete 100% truth. In that scenario, the evidence which gives you near to 100% to be taken as a risk or the decision. That means you're not 100% sure, but 90% sure that 10% risk you need to accept it. And if you are able to be successful, excellent, congratulations. If you are unable to be successful, revisit the decision making, revisit the evidence, revisit the information, try to do analyzing again the data you have got. So that means critical thinking gives you objective way of assessing the problem on daily basis. One more best example is thesis or a dissertation, which is done in post-graduation, because this is where the critical thinking plays a crucial role. First and the foremost, when you do a thesis, you will plan the study in the area of what you want to do the study. You will do the review of literature. That means you will be analyzing the information from all possible angle. You will look the gap in the literature, the evidence. Is there any gap? Is there anything which we have not understood? Now, once you know there is a gap in the literature or there is gap in the evidence or the scientific information, now you'll raise questions to fill those gaps. To answer those questions, you'll develop a methodology or the methodology of doing that study. Collect the data, analyze the data. Once you have analyzed the data, you will draw conclusion based on the data. This is called as critical thinking. That is called as evidence-based decision making. That critical thinking needs to be inculcated in every child and adolescent. Now the question is, how does critical thinking helps? Critical thinking skills can help someone to better understand themselves, the people around them, and the world around them. That means you are not taking the information based on face value. Critical thinking helps to understand yourself first, then the people around you and the world around you. Critical thinking can assist every day in problem solving, creatively and productively. Here, you need to understand life skills are interconnected. I have discussed about creative thinking in one of the video. Please do visit and find what is creative thinking. And I'll also be making a video on problem solving and decision making. That means all these life skills are interconnected. Hence, you need to know each one of them. How to teach critical thinking in children? That is very, very essential. I've discussed till now what is critical thinking and what does it mean. That means should all critical thinking children who are need to learn, should they do thesis? That is the question. Should they do dissertation to understand critical thinking? Not required. Teaching critical thinking should start early in life. It is basically explaining logically to the child. And child also should not take whatever you say. It should ask questions. Ask question, why is it that way? Why can't it be other way? And giving reasons for doing things. That means if you are choosing certain things, that you need to assess the information. Encourage the children to ask questions. And you also need to ask open-ended question to the child. That means the child starts thinking creatively, and also it will start critically thinking whether the information given to me is right, wrong, what is the evidence based to it, and what decision should be objectively based. Now, another important thing is ask them to develop alternative hypotheses, solutions, and reasoning for a problem. Clarify the meaning to the kids. Explain the problem in 6-year-old kid, because 6-year-old kid will be able to think, analyze, analytical thinking will be developing. This is the time you should start providing critical thinking to the child. Ask the kid to journal the thinking process. If it is able to put that on the diary everyday basis, it will be able to understand its own thinking process. If it is able to understand its own thinking process, it will be able to understand its error in thinking, biases in thinking, how the child is thinking. That means it will be able to understand its own thinking process. If it is able to understand its own thinking process, it will be able to now move to the next step, understanding the people around them. And finally, understanding the world around. That means critical thinking is very, very essential. And now the children also should be encouraged to express themselves in a different way of medium. Here, in critical thinking, the child need to learn how to write the problem, or else if the child is able to draw the problem, it's excellent. Speaking it out, what is the problem, is also very essential. Sometimes staring at the problem also will give the solution. And even the problems can also be formulated in a tabular form, chat form. So that means the child is able to place the problem and also critically evaluate the problem in a different ways. It's not just thinking, it has to be presented in different ways. So that the child, a child who is very good in drawing, may able to perceive the problem and critically evaluate the problem in a drawing format. In that phenomena, the child will start solving the problem. And now, the child also should be encouraged to challenge the biases, challenge the world thinking, or else the customary thinking. So the child should be encouraged about that. And also, very important way of critical thinking is working backward. That means if you have a problem, you need to creatively think about a solution. From the solution, how to achieve at the problem. That means you are going in a reverse manner. This also will put the puzzle in the right place. That means you will be able to solve the problem. Let's understand the difference between creative thinking and critical thinking. Here, the creative thinking is generative, divergent, imaginative, speculative, subjective, possibility of various form is available, and it is a process based, and it is forming the idea. That is creative. Whereas critical is analytical. That means you are analyzing the problem. It is convergent. That means the thinking process goes towards solving the problem. It is based on logical. Whereas creative is imaginative. The critical is based on logical and reasoning. Whereas creative is more of speculative. Critical is very objective, whereas creative is subjective more. It is probability based in critical. That is risk assessment based on whichever the answer which is towards the maximum probability, you will take that decision. Whereas creative is more of possibility. This is possible, that is possible. That means creative thinking is the first step towards the critical thinking. In critical thinking, You are testing the hypothesis. In creative thinking, you are forming the hypothesis. Critical thinking is based on outcome, whereas creative thinking is based on processes. So these are the differences between creative and critical thinking. Which is superior, whether it is critical thinking or is it creative thinking? Let me make my point very clear. Critical thinking and creative thinking skills are valuable, neither is superior over the other. That means both are essential. Both are standing from one aspect of the spectrum to another. You're moving toward the other end of the spectrum. That means it is a spectrum, it is not a categorical thinking. Here, both are part of solution. In fact, it has been shown that when either is omitted, either the critical or creative thinking, the problem solving process declines completely. That means you need to have both. Both critical thinking and creative thinking are very essential. You cannot omit the other one. That means it is very clear. Critical thinking and creative thinking are the faces of the same coin. That means if you have to have the value of the coin, both the faces should be intact. Let's understand about critical thinking examples. Critical thinking is more of interpreting the data, critiquing the data, analyzing the information, reasoning the information, comparing, sequencing, contrasting, inferring, integrating, forecasting, classifying, evaluating, hypothesizing, patterning, and profiling. That means all these types of thinking are called as critical thinking. You need to have this to have a problem solving skill. That means critical thinking is very, very essential. The first step is creative thinking. And once you got the information, you have innovative ideas, then you will start doing all these things like interpreting, critiquing, comparing, contrasting the solutions available. And you will finally take a decision based upon the evidence on the data. To conclude, my dear friends, critical thinking is an important element of professional fields. Not only professional fields, in day to day life, it is very essential. And it is also a very important in academic disciplines. If you want to excel in your academics, you need to have a good creative and critical thinking. Critical thinking is to collect the data, analyze it, interpret the findings, explain it, and making a sense out of it and implementing is critical thinking. Critical thinker will identify, analyze, solve the problem systematically. That is what is critical thinking. Thank you very much for giving your valuable time. Stay safe.